Hello everyone, welcome back to Connect HR Hangouts. It's your favorite sizzling host, Babi Mawela, and we are back with season 2 and episode 12, I think, of our very, very exciting podcast. Thank you so much for your loyalty and your support. If you're new here, welcome. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and click on the notification button so that every time we upload a new episode, you get a notification. Actually, we're not in studio today. I almost said in studio. I am joined by someone I've been chasing. You know, I need to put that on record so that you put some respect on us. But I am chatting with Londiwe Mncube today. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm fabulous.
Thank you for inviting us in your lovely home. And, you know, the hospitality is amazing.
Oh, but of course.
So this is your time to shine. Please let our guests know who Londiwe is, where you're from, what you do, and everything. Please, the floor is yours.
Oh, wow. I could say a lot about myself.
Take your time.
Oh, geez. Are you sure you want to say take your time with HR people? Because, well, I can give you a breakdown of my CV and my history and,
Go for it.
And everything else. But so, yeah, I'm Londiwe Mncube, and I'm currently the Chief Human Resources Officer at the Competition Commission, where I look after the entire human capital function. But I think before I'm even the Chief Human Resources Officer, I'm a dynamic individual and a mother to 3 beautiful children, whom I have the most fun in the world with.
Yeah.
If anybody follows me, they know that my week not only starts with a post of either my children, but really I'm one positive individual. I'm quite an optimist. I'm all about positive psychology, and I'm a person who feeds off positive energies. And in the heart of what we do, that's so critical, because you can't be a closed off person and yet you want to be a person for people.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's what's really set myself apart. And it's been quite an interesting journey, I think, being in the human capital space. It didn't start off that way.
Okay.
I never thought that, I didn't even know what HR was when I initially got into the space. In fact, I wanted to be in PR. No, actually, even rewind. Even rewind before that, because when I finished matric, the goal was to be in the performing arts. So I went and I studied dramatic arts. But of course, once I was there, I realized that maybe that's not the space, but more so as a hobby. I'm still a full-on supporter of the arts. I absolutely love the arts. And I supported, and I've had an opportunity as a side thing just to be on stage, I'd do it.
Okay.
Because you just get an opportunity to play so many personas, but you also get an opportunity to be in so many people's different shoes as well, which I quite enjoy. So then fast forward, found myself in Northern Ireland, and I got my first exposure to human capital.
Okay.
And it was by chance. I mean, I was working in a gift shop, and I engaged with, I didn't even know at the time that the individual owned a recruitment agency. I was selling a book on strategy, and then I was quite interested in why that person was buying a book around the army, and their reflection was the greatest strategists are your army generals. So I read a lot of army books. So that sparked a conversation, and in that conversation, he then pointed out to me and said, "You sound like you have so much potential," because we went from speaking about the book itself, but also around what the current economics looks like of the country, but also what the talent in the space looks like. And I thought, why are we talking about talent now? But okay, I'm going to flow with it. I'm going to continue talking. And we did. And that's where it all started. Got me in, started off as a recruitment coordinator. And that's the first entry point of HR, because that's your first touch point to the space in terms of the employee life cycle. And from there, then I started, of course, then made sure that I studied in the same direction of now where my interests lay.
Okay.
But in between all of that, I still wanted to do a bit of a stint in marketing, advertising, and PR. That's when I then decided, let me go do a short course. I did a diploma in marketing, advertising, and PR, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I really feel it was not a waste for me to do it, because even in my current role, the things that you learn there is still very much important. You still need to be able to market the HR function in itself so that people utilize it in the manner that it's meant to be used. From a public relations perspective, there's a certain image and a brand that you need to uphold that becomes reflective of the culture of the institution. And we are in the forefront as human capital of all of those. So that's where the branding then comes in. So I may not use it from an agency perspective, but certainly I think it is a skill. It's an undervalued skill that is required in the human capital space, untapped, that I really think we need to start exploring and seeing whether how we empower, in fact, how we even embed it even in our modules. I mean, when I did now I fast forward, I then did my master's with UP in human resources and labor relations. That module wasn't there. And I think how I benefited from it, I really think that it was an opportunity. Academia should consider looking at how the landscape is also changing. In fact, we were having a conversation not too long ago with one of the professors from the University of Pretoria, and we were reflecting about how is the content, academic content, preparing HR professionals in such an evolving landscape? Yes. And the answer was no. Maybe we need business to partner more with universities so that it keeps the curriculum relevant. So it was, yes, you get the textbook around what HR does, and you get the textbook of how to manage change. But when it comes to the real life situation, it's a completely different ballgame. That's why you cannot that's why you cannot, for me anyway, just get employment on your basis of qualification. Yes. Because there is a certain nuance that you require, which is more hands-on, that I think becomes then that missing transition from your academia right through to what the workplace looks like. So that was quite an enjoyable conversation that we had, because then it became, to what extent does business get involved in shaping the curriculum? And we talk about agility, we talk about innovation. Is the curriculum agile? Is the material agile? Does the material spark innovation? And these are some of the conversations that I think as a fraternity, we need to start being more bullish around having conversations of that nature, because as we are grooming the younger HR professionals or human capital professionals, they do have to have this appreciation. Yes. The trend is go and study HR. It's an easier qualification. Actually, it's not. When you get into the workplace, it may be an easy qualification, but it's not that easy. It's not that easy now when you are inside and you actually now have to do the work in itself. And this is what I always tell some of the young people that I mentor around how to carefully select some of your subject choices, even when you do decide to do part-time study, right? Whilst you're still working. It all forms part of, suppose, the bigger picture of what would be an all-rounded human capital specialist. See, I told you, I can go on and on and on and on.
I am here for it. And I'm listening to you speak, and I'm like, you actually have technically answered the first question without even me introducing the topic as yet. By the way,
what is the topic?
Our topic is the evolving landscape of talent acquisition. because we are taking into consideration there's AI now.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of tools that are helping talent acquisition evolve over time. And so, which speaks to my next question. So how do you see talent acquisition evolving in the next 5 years? I think you have given us what has happened until now. So how do you see it in the years to come?
Sure. In the years to come, talent acquisition is going to be such a difficult space because the war for talent is real. We've been talking about the war for talent for the past probably 5 to 10 years as a fraternity. But I think what we don't realize is that with now remote working, in fact, what COVID introduced is a proper global landscape for talent, a global environment for talent.
Yeah.
And it calls for human capital professionals to have their finger on the pulse when it comes to geopolitics and the changes around, because your talent is now very mobile. I could wake up tomorrow, and if things are looking better for me in another country, nothing's going to tie me down to South Africa.
Yeah.
Literally, I can pack up my bags and go. How even schooling has evolved. Back in the past, you would be bound by kids and schooling, but now I've even seen a rise in COVID. Yes. COVID normalized and rationalized homeschooling. It also rationalized how we need to even train our kids to be agile and quickly adapt.
100%.
And beautifully so, kids just do generally adapt quickly. But they had to do it 10 times even quicker during COVID. So as a working mother, if I get an opportunity, I mean, of course, there's consultation with your husband and everything else and everyone else. But in the main, you have now organizations that are willing to take on families. Yes. So if I can get an opportunity and they take on my spouse, what is keeping me in the country? So what we need to keep our finger on the pulse is the improvements that outside of even South Africa, outside of our borders, what improvements are companies and organizations making to make themselves more competitive?
Yes.
So that, because the kind of workforce that we are really competing for is one at a click of a finger can tell you, I'm not even going to serve notice. Thank you very much, but I'm leaving. Right? And I don't even want to say which generation it is because that poor generation has been given so many tags. It's been suffering. It's been given a gazillion stickers of which generation is this generation is demanding, this generation is, and that may be so, but this generation knows exactly what they want. And they are unapologetic about what they want. And as employers, we need to come to the party around, you have to also raise the bar. Because what they bring to the table, they can easily take it elsewhere. So it is that kind of, suppose it goes back to what I was talking about when I said agility and adaptability that's required. So even in our own recruitment practices, we need to start thinking of varied types of contracts. Even leave. I mean, you've got a generation that is happy to work 3 days a week for less the amount to live a purpose-driven life for self-fulfillment. They're okay with that. So how do we structure our environments in such a manner that it does, because we still need those skills. We still need that skill set. But how do we adapt the space in such a way that they feel accommodated? But then on the other side, and I spoke about this at the conference we were at last week, on the other end, you're also dealing with a nervous workforce.
Yes.
The workforce is nervous because of the socioeconomics, right? Things are not looking too great. Therefore, they think to themselves, now we are told about AI. What happens to my job? Can I afford, in this economic environment, can I afford to be unemployed? Now what happens? I end up doing things that I'm not even supposed to be doing to try and keep myself relevant. So we're not taking the workforce, they're not part of the conversation. And I think we need to start filtering. If I think about the level that AI has been pitched, robust conversations are happening at certain levels, but it's not cascading to give the assurance, but also to give the buy-in, but also to get a sense of ownership that yes, AI is here. Let's embrace it because it's going to enable us. We're not, and I almost feel like we need to go through a process of reselling the benefits that it may bring or that it even will bring. And we break it down into bite sizes. So many a times we say all these buzzwords because it's the newest word in the space. But how do you make it practical for me? I'm a cleaner. How do you make it practical for me?
Sure.
I'm a receptionist. How do you make it practical for me? Now you're telling me we're going to be introducing efficiencies, and I'm thinking to myself, now I'm going to be redundant. I'm not going to have a job. What else am I going to do if I'm not answering the phones? Instead of saying, how else can I either upskill myself or be a little bit more multi-skilled so that I can be fluid within the organization? So we're not promoting, and we do need to start promoting fluidity, but we're not promoting fluidity in our organizations because we fear what comes with fluidity. Of course, what comes with fluidity is you are stirring people up, right? You are. This is a proper questioning the status quo, because when things are fluid, we human beings are very guarded, and we are very much self-centered. So now you're thinking, if you're going to be in a fluid space, it means somebody can take my space at any given time. And we need to change that. We need to change that perception, but that's working on the mind. And if you work on the mind, that's where the ownership comes in. So right now, I'm not going to own it. If you're telling me we're going to have fluid spaces, and I'm thinking, hey, fluid. So does that mean tomorrow I can wake up and there's two crows, or now there's two people in the same position? What does that mean? Does that mean now we're going to be fighting for who's responsible for what? And our performance management systems have not evolved to accommodate fluidity. They haven't, because your performance management system says you are hired to do A, B, C, and D, and you stay within the confines or the borders of what you are hired. And that's where it ends. That's it. But then that's not giving you an opportunity to think about things differently. There's that component. Then there's the component that I also love to talk about, which is intellectual maturity. And I say this countless number of times, that intellectual maturity means you need to accept that at some point in time, you are going to be a beginner in something. Doesn't matter how senior you are. But to have the maturity to accept that I today may not know it, and I'm happy to be led by you, and I'm happy to be guided by you, then let's create. We're able to create an environment where we can keep our workforce. So right now, I think for me, what the talent landscape looks like, we should be worried, but at the same time, it's calling us to take up the challenge. We should be stepping up to take the challenge, because we've realized that, yes, we now have, somebody was saying last week at one of the conferences that we've said we want a seat around the table. We have our seat around the table, but what are you doing with that seat? What kind of conversations are you having holding that seat? Or are you just there as a tick box exercise? She says she wanted a seat around the table. She has it. What does she want now? You know what I mean? Like, she has it. What else can you? So it's taking ownership and doing something with that seat that you have now around the table. And it's being intelligent around how you utilize that particular seat. And talent acquisition is the best place, because if you want to evolve the environment, it's also about who you get in. It's really about who you get in. In fact, I had an aha moment last week, and as I was chatting to somebody, and we were talking about authenticity. And I said, many a times we think authenticity, we say authenticity is positivity only. And it's actually not. Authenticity is being you. And as human capital, we have to now realize which type of authenticity don't we want in the environment. Because you can have somebody who is consistently mean. That's authentically themselves. That's how they are.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of person you want in your space? No. That's not the kind of so it's calling us to even sharpen our own recruitment and assessment tools. We cannot be using legacy recruitment tools anymore. But we also can't have a heavy reliance on AI. So there's that
100%.
human side, there's that human touch that's needed, because we are, of course, losing some talent because of automated processes where they then get sifted through. I click something incorrectly by mistake. Can't redeem myself. Do you think I can call in the talent acquisition leader and say, well, I actually kind of answered when there's 300 other people who are applying for that post?
Yeah.
You can't really do that. So now you've lost an opportunity. Or what do? The generation that we're talking about. Oh, well, I'll just move on to the next.
Yeah.
And moving on to the next, they easily get the next because they've made themselves so adaptable. It's no longer a badge of honor that you can stay 50 years in an organization. No.
Sure.
And even how our talent acquisition specialists even look at CVs and review the CVs, it's no longer in that lens of this one is too jumpy. Back in the days when I started out in recruitment, it was, let's look at tenure. This one has been here in this company for 2 months, and then 3 months, and then 6 months. They're not going to stay. They're not stable. We must also be okay that maybe you're going to have that talent for 6 months and they might be impactful. They might serve the purpose that you need them to serve for those 6 months or even that year, and you're fine.
Sure. So you've touched on the threats of certain tools that I used in recruitment, which actually was pouring into my next question. So what are your thoughts on the traditional methods of acquiring talent? Should we do away with them completely or maintain some? I know you've answered parts of this question, but how are organizations doing it of late, and do you think it's effective?
Look, recruitment by any name, in fact, anything by its very nature is not 100%.
Yeah.
You can never get 100% higher, but you can, of course, enhance your processes to try and get you to as high of a percent as possible to the right fit. But then again, what is the right fit?
Yeah.
What is the right fit? For the longest time, you have your questionnaire, you have your CV, and this becomes a right fit. Or does this person talk the way that the organization does? Do they have the kind of language that we have? And I think we need to start, we do need to start interrogating whether our methods are fit for purpose. Because if somebody shakes the status quo, maybe that's the kind of person that you need
100%.
for certain change to take place. If we are constantly hiring for fit, how do we define fit? Alignment to the organizational values, correct. You must be aligned. But what else? But line managers take fit to the next level. Fit can be, do they look the profile that represents the organization? Do they sound a particular way? Or do they, and it's, I almost feel like sometimes the word fit is used to make superficial assessments, which is problematic.
Yeah.
Highly, highly problematic. One of the things that I think has really worked well, when it comes to a recruitment within our organization is that we still retain doing case studies as part of the instrument in our shortlisting, process. And the reason why we do that is this is where you see application of understanding and application of knowledge. And I think that is definitely one tool that should be retained in the process, because I can get into an interview and I can talk well, but I want to see, are you able to apply yourself to the task at hand?
Yes.
So we try and make the case study be as practical as possible so that we get a sense of, if you're given a real life case, how would you handle it? How would you address it? What would you do? How do you apply yourself on it? And we interrogate that. So we spend more time interrogating the application rather than the tick-based exercise where we say, so have you done this? Have you done that? Have you... Of course, I'll answer. I can easily say yes. I can easily say yes. But also psychometric assessments. I mean, there's been a lot of debate around whether psychometric assessments are still a valuable tool to utilize. In my view, they play a certain role in the process. But the mistake that some entities or organizations do is that they make it the deciding factor. Yes. And I think we need to look at the whole being. So the assessments can give you a snippet or a view of an individual. Yeah. Overlay it with the application.
100%.
Right? And then you overlay it with the conversation. If I had my way of setting up structures, I would really rather have more conversations with candidates than interviews.
Yes.
Because from a conversation, you're able to get so much more substance and you're able to get so much more understanding of how the person's mind functions. And it's less rehearsed, as you had said. It is definitely less rehearsed, and it's more genuine in my view.
I agree.
And of course, I mean, some people can act. That may be it, but to a greater extent, you can only act for so long. But I mean, that would now make recruitment processes quite long, because imagine if you've got 7 people that you have to interview and 7 people that you have to have conversations with. That then brings a different dynamic to it. But the other thing that I really love that's now being introduced is, of course, your video interviews. Those have streamlined the talent acquisition process. And I think it's a really good tool because you're able to see how a person can function, of course, under pressure, which is quite important. But at the same time, it's not considerate of certain conditions that certain people could be going through, right? The lights could just spark me in a certain way, but that's not indicative of how I perform or of my work. In fact, we were talking about how do we accommodate people on different spectrums. If you put a camera in front of it, that does not mean that they can't do certain things. It just means that they need to be accommodated in a different environment. So you see, it's a double-edged sword where you've got these brilliant tools, but it can equally take out brilliant candidates from the process, and you don't want that.
Sure. We just need to take a 5-minute break, and we will be back with part 2 of the episode.
Kungabe khona engizisola ngakho? Hayi, angicabangi kanjalo.
Such things happen unexpectedly. The process of document submissions can be annoying sometimes.
Work is always tense, but there's always a reward at the end.
Having personal obligations is not always a bad thing.
Mommy, are you going to be able to take me to the doctor?
Of course, my baby.
Elithuba engilitholileyo leze isimo singafani nakuqala.
Loving what you do sometimes doesn't feel like a job.
Using modern day technologies has made document submissions easier.
Being part of your community creates a safe space not only at work, but also at home.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for staying tuned. We are still with Londiwe, and we have discussed possibly everything regarding the evolving landscape of talent management. Londiwe, thank you so much. So far, I'm having a great time, and I hope you are too.
Yeah.
And you're sharing so much information that is very important regarding talent acquisition. So, as before our little break, I was sitting here just thinking we have this information due to exposure or knowledge, and because perhaps we are in this industry. So I'm thinking of it from a point of view of a small business, which, for example, I work for, and a large organization that you work for too. How is the industry bridging that gap in terms of talent acquisition? What tools are being put in place for organizations to gain this type of knowledge about the evolving recruitment processes that are currently taking place?
Upskilling, in fact, maybe before I even say upskilling, there's such an important competence that people need to have, which is leading self. And leading self forces you to always research and keep abreast of things that are happening within your particular space.
Okay.
I always say to my team, what you know today is obsolete tomorrow. So how do you constantly going to conferences? It's not because you are bored and you want to fill up certain time in your space. It's not that. That's your opportunity to learn from other professionals. Because when all those, there's so much wisdom that is in that room that we take for granted. So that's intentional.
Yeah.
What you read, what do you read? I'm going to go back to the conversations I have with some of the young people that I mentor. I ask them, what do you read? What is on your phone? So I love social media. Anybody who knows me, they know I love posting.
Yeah.
They know I love, but I'm a whole being, right? In between all of that, I ensure that I remain relevant within my industry. Otherwise, the industry is going to move faster than me. And I'm going to be trying to play catch up constantly.
Yeah.
And so it's that constant, keeping yourself constantly engaged with the right kind of tools, but also the kind of mediums that you attach yourself to. And I know sometimes people say, look, there's just always negative news. Let me not be listening or reading to. You can select. Select what kind of industry-related material that you would want to be looking at or reading continuously. But I think as a country, I don't think we have the maturity to help each other as much as we should, big organizations and small organizations, because we constantly see each other as competition. In fact, we could even be in completely different spaces or even different industries. But our inclination is to think we want to compete because that talent, we all are after that particular talent. Therefore, am I likely to say, I work in the public sector. What I should be doing is I perhaps should be even looking at having fireside chats or whatever with other professionals within the space.
Yeah.
But don't close it to that. This is a conversation we were having last week as well, talking about bridging the gap between the private sector and the public sector, because we certainly can learn a lot from one another.
Yeah.
There are certain things there are certain areas that bring stability in the public sector that can be borrowed in the private sector, just like there are exciting initiatives that the private sector can run with that certainly we can borrow as the public sector. But no one is intentional in bridging that gap that you're talking about. And I almost feel like this is where the kind of the middle ground or the uniter or the glue that could bring us all together is educational institutions, because we all end up there, the same institutions, whether you're in public, private, doesn't matter what sector, but we all meet up there because we're constantly upskilling ourselves. So this goes back to the comment I made earlier, that if our educational institutions are not agile and relevant, we're never going to be all on the same page as a fraternity. There's going to always be a lag somewhere, because others have got more exposure than other institutions. So it's also ensuring that, like I mentioned, you make sure that you get yourself into certain circles that keep you excited about your space. But also, if it's a space that you are meant to be in, you will ensure that you know exactly what's happening in that space. Somebody was saying to me, you make HR look so exciting. I say, I make it look exciting because I love what I do. I enjoy what I do. I'm in the space that serves my purpose.
Yes.
And I went through a whole journey of understanding what my purpose in life is. And when I had my awakening, in fact, somebody gave me the awakening from their observation, where they said, your purpose is awakening people's potential. What better place is there to do that than the space that I am in, where you are constantly awakening someone's potential? And when you are in human capital, you're not looking at just one side of a human being. You're looking at a whole being. So the opportunity of making that impact is so far and wide that you can't even begin to understand the level of joy that you could be bringing the next person without even realizing. But I mean, of course, there is level of upset that you also bring by virtue of your role, because you are also the one who's monitoring the rules, whether you like it or not, because you function in a system. So you have to ensure that there is that level of compliance. So for me, it's a combination of resources that I think we have to be intentional in tapping into if we are to ensure that we build one another in the space at the level where there's standardization. You know, if you look at certain professions, if you're a CA, it's clear what the standard is. There shouldn't be, HR yala. The HR yala is different. Imagine if we got to that kind of level as a fraternity, where it's clear that if you're an HR business partner, doesn't matter which organization you are, this is what is the bare minimum that is expected of you. So that consistency in competence would certainly bring the anchor that's needed, I think, in our space.
Sure. And so I think we've been touching a lot on recruitment processes and talent acquisition, but I'm more intrigued by talent behavior as well, because I think that ultimately these processes affect the talent over time without us even realizing, which speaks to my next question of, so you hired Babi. Babi was the perfect fit at this time for this certain job or post. And so how are organizations managing the changes in talent behavior? Because you find that Babi was perfect a year ago for this, but then here over time you're realizing that, you know, there's a change in behavior. How are organizations managing that by not just firing the person because all of a sudden, you know, they're no longer the perfect fit? What are the steps that organizations should take in that regard?
I don't have the answer.
Okay.
but I can definitely tell you that we are struggling. That's why I say I don't have the answer, because this means having a good partnership between line managers and HR. HR cannot sit in their corner and all of a sudden see a certain behavior change. Excuse me. It's usually a build-up, which would have started somewhere. And who's got sight of that? It's line.
Yeah.
But line is not bold enough to make those observations, because they in fact, I was reading something this afternoon where it says, maximize leadership moments. And sometimes leadership think that leadership moments are big moments. Observing someone's behavior change is a leadership moment, because you have an opportunity to have an engagement of what has gotten to where you are. And that can be mistaken with micromanaging. We're not saying micromanage. We're saying be more observant. You may not even have the conversation. In fact, being observant doesn't mean asking someone every day, how are you? But we are creatures of habit, right? If you start noticing that something is going off the rail, you wait for a performance management process to then only have the conversation with me. Is that okay? That's not okay. It's not okay, because we are at a tipping point. But also employees are not taking the responsibility in taking their line managers or leadership along with them on the journey.
Yeah.
Because we're all going through something. That's the reality. Even the leaders are going through their own things. Everybody is going through something. And yes, they say you earn the big bucks so that you must ensure that you have a little bit of an upper eye to observe. But if I miss it, are you taking time also to say, look, can I just take you into confidence of what my journey is currently? And this is how I would like for you to support me, if it's acceptable, without putting the burden on somebody else. But because things are going so fast, we end up putting the pressure on somebody else, and you just ignore that person. So if you don't fire them, you just ignore them. Or if you don't performance manage them, you're like, well, they may as well just ignore them. But ignoring them means you are piling on work onto somebody else. That's not okay, because now you are causing somebody else to go off the rails. And they're going off the rails because you didn't want to address something that you observed. Or in fact, you don't want to address things that you didn't observe that you should have observed.
Yeah.
Because had you observed them, you would have been in a better position to have a more directed conversation that looks at the actual issue. But you start now thinking what the issues could be. So when I say I don't have the answer, is that I think it's something that we are all struggling with as a fraternity, in how do we enforce that element of observation in line managers' roles and responsibilities without crossing the line of micromanaging, but also without crossing the line of being too much in people's faces, because there's also that.
Yes.
You can sometimes be too overbearing, and people think, but you're not going into my business. Why do you want to know my business?
Yeah.
So it's training leaders on how, and that's a peculiar skill that you need to be able to have, is at what point do you grant somebody grace? And at what point do you call out something that's not right there and there? Because sometimes it could be behaviors that are unacceptable. But because you don't want to tackle it head on, you just think, let me avoid it. Because avoiding it is probably the best thing to do than for me to handle it or tackle it head on.
Thank you, Londiwe. Thank you so much. And I think people can now see why I waited for so long for this episode. And which speaks to my last question, which is, I think, a little bit laid back. You speak a lot about your purpose. And I always say, I find it terrifying that I don't know what that means for me. I haven't found my purpose. So what is your purpose in detail? And maybe how do you encourage others to find their purpose?
Yeah. Until you get to that point where you say, this is my purpose, you go through many iterations of what you think your purpose is. Many iterations. And I think my discovery happened possibly 2 years ago when I completed my Global Executive Development Program with Gibbs. They forced us to go back to when the turnaround moment was for you, where you realized this was the moment that mattered for me in my life. And which is so funny because for me, it was a moment of disappointment.
Sure.
High school was a high flyer. Primary high flyer. And always in leadership positions. But I had that one life-changing moment where I had to face disappointment head on. And how the coach or the coaching sessions made me realize that that failure was actually the opportunity for me to rediscover myself and my abilities and what I could do. The one thing that I've always known about myself is that I want to leave an impact. I always say like a pebble. When you drop a pebble into a water, I want to be the waves that transcend. That's what I've always wanted. And I could only put it into words after I had that moment of coaching. Not going to lie and say, I discovered this by myself. And this is why I say, what sources do you tap into to assist you in your life and in your career journey? You need to invest in all of those resources in order to be able to, and you need to have honest conversations with yourself.
Yeah.
For the longest time, I thought, is this my journey because of the profession that I am in? I had to get to a point where I said, my journey has to exist as me, Ulondi. Whether I'm in HR, whether I'm in marketing, whether I'm in, doesn't matter what profession I am in. What is my purpose? What legacy do I want to leave for myself? I mean, so befitting to talk about legacy, celebrating Youth Month. I keep saying to you how much I love Youth Month, right? And for me, it's a constant reminder of what those who were before us did for us to be able to be in positions that we could be in at our age. I got into a leadership position at a youngish age. I'm not saying younger, but at a youngish age. And that's possible because of what our forefathers did for us, the struggles that they fought for us to be able to do that. Did they know that was their purpose in life? I don't know.
Sure.
But they knew they were fighting for something bigger. So we have the responsibility to make sure that you get to a point where you understand and know what your purpose in life is. Tomorrow I could wake up and decide, I want to change the direction that my life is taking.
Yeah.
But what's going to anchor me is what my purpose in life is and the legacy that I want to leave one day, and what my kids should know me for whilst even still alive. Because the mistake that we sometimes make is that we always want to talk about legacy when we're gone. But the build up to the legacy is whilst you're still very much alive, and helping my kids and my family and my circle of friends and my circle of trust understand that this is my purpose. This is what I have been ordained to do. And I mean, spirituality also plays a huge role in anchoring my journey. So these are all the different sources that I was talking about, where you've got the academic side, which would have been that program. I've got the coaching side, but also the people that I surround myself with. They help me to understand your circle. Your circle gets you closer and closer to understanding yourself and to understanding what you will tolerate, what you will not tolerate, what you will support, what you will not support. And all of those factors then lead you to where do you what do you want to then be known for? And when I said to you earlier that for me, in the heart of it, I discovered that everything that I do, I'm doing it because awakening people's potential, it fulfills me. My heart is full. What you do once that has been ignited, I firmly believe that's now somebody else's purpose. And they will play that role in your life with the purpose that they have. So it's almost like, for me, it's a relay. The purpose that I have in life can help somebody else fulfill theirs to a certain extent. Somebody else's purpose comes and helps. Somebody else's purpose, that's what it is. That's what life is about. You constantly getting the baton from somebody, but it's going to be your turn soon to start passing the baton. So you are in this never-ending relay of life. But timing is important to know when it's your turn to start passing the baton, because you can easily get trapped in being the one receiving the baton. Then that doesn't move you. It's at that point where you now stagnate. Because now, what are you doing? You're just constantly waiting. You're constantly waiting for the baton. But it's at that moment where you now stand up and say, hold on, the race needs to turn. Now I need to start passing it to the next generation or to the next upcoming people, whether it's in my space or not in my space. But it's to be it's that intentionality again coming to play and doing something about your purpose. You know, somebody said something so interesting. I can't remember her name. I think she goes by Za. And she was saying, when she spoke about her purpose, she said, you know, I don't want to be known as the leader who went up Mount Everest and there's a selfie of me by myself. I would like for there to be a selfie with many other faces as I'm up on Mount Everest. It's still a selfie because I'm still applauding myself for going through the journey. But I acknowledge that I didn't go through the journey by myself. And this is where my support structure has played such a critical and pivotal role in my life. My mother, she's been an anchor. I've been able to achieve so many things because she's been by my side. And maybe because I'm the last born, maybe I get those perks, but there's only two of us and my sister. My sister always speaks words of affirmation to me, to a point where she says those things that I now believe it. Who do you have in your circle or in your space that speaks life into your life? Because if you don't have that, then you kind of veer more and more away from your life's journey. But if you have that constant cheerleader, there's cheerleaders in my life that I met in my professional space that have spoken words about me, beautiful words about me when I'm not in the room. That has also helped in me holding on even more to my potential. And I'm not saying I need somebody, I need someone to affirm me. No, but as a human being, you do need words of affirmation, but it's not the only thing. So I love the discovery that I'm going through in my life. And I think I don't want to be stagnant as well. And if I wake up in the next 2 years and I realize that maybe I'm in now a different season in my life, and this new season in my life requires me to realign my purpose, that's also okay. But we are so caught up in wanting to only chase one single purpose that we then think having multiple purposes is bad. It's not bad. It's knowing when that purpose has to serve you at that particular time. But once you know the core, it will have nuances. But you have to get to a point where you understand the core.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Londiwe Mncube. Where do people find you on social media?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
On social media, wow. Sure. On social media, you'll find Londi the influencer, Londi the mom, Londi the... What else would they find on social media?
LinkedIn.
What else would they find? Zena, you can tell me. The choice of having blended lives. My daughter
the
is
professional. Every personality.
Every personality, because I'm an open book.
Yeah.
I'm a very transparent individual. So on LinkedIn, I'm there, of course, professional branding.
Yes.
I'm there on LinkedIn, also on Instagram. But of course, there's more close kind of knit following. But in the main, it would be on your LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I do quite a bit of speaking as well in terms of various conferences. So look out for which conference we're going to be at. That's where we met.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let us know what you think in the comment section. We'd love to hear your feedback, whether positive or negative. It helps us to grow. Thank you so much. See you on episode 13. Yeah, that's the next episode. It's your favorite sizzling host. Bye.